Afternoon. This is Andrea Ormsby. Thank you for joining in. Hello, replay viewers. Sorry we missed you. Hello, Periscope. Hello, Facebook. Again, I am Andrea Ormsby, and I help encouraging moms. I serve you by helping you to get clear on what your next steps should be so that you can mother from a place of strength and courage instead of from a place of fear. And I've been talking this week about my newly released book, My Twin Mom Method, Being Honest with Your Children. And specifically in this book, I really go into my intentional approach for building trust and honest relationships with my children. If you've been following me at all on Facebook or on Periscope, you know that I have 3 amazing little boys and I absolutely adore them. I have a 9-year-old and twin 7-year-olds. And specifically because of how we have been pouring into their lives intentionally and building relationship that we have with them, this is how we've allowed ourselves to have that safe, open relationship that my boys actually do utilize to talk to me about whatever ideas or concerns or questions that they have that come up in their minds. And so I've been taking time over this past week to go over certain parts of my book that I talk about that deal with maybe some of those difficult areas that can tend to be a difficult area for moms to discuss with their children. If you haven't seen all of my scopes, Periscope, they're still up there, and Facebook, I did also live stream some of my scopes with you, so hopefully you'll be able to click on my page and view some of those posts. Hi Glenn, thanks for joining on Facebook. And so I do hope and pray that you have listened to some of those scopes or read some of those scopes. Thank you so much for the thumbs ups on Facebook there. And that you have really been blessed by what I've been sharing, because again, I really feel it's important for us as parents, both moms and dads, can benefit from the concepts and the ideas that I'm bringing up in my book, because it specifically just encourages you to think intentionally about how you are pouring into the lives of your children and building that trust and honest relationship. Because as I say in my book, oftentimes we expect our children to be honest with us and share information with us, or even just tell us the truth when we bring up questions to them. But we, as well as parents, need to be an example for them to follow, so that they can also see what it is to be honest and see that kind of relationship in action, as well as you being honest to them, so that they can follow that. The days of do what I say and not as I do are completely gone. I remember those days, but that is not how we can effectively influence our children, especially in the culture that we are living in. If this is what we want to do, we want to positively affect them as opposed to negatively, or be more of a hypocritical kind of approach. So today specifically, I'm dealing with a subject that I do talk about in my book, and that's specifically, how do your children see your faith? How do they actually see it in action? Again, the days of do as I say and not as I do really aren't effective in teaching our children. If you have a spouse or significant other and they are, I'm sorry, Facebook is chipping in and out, so I apologize if the connection is poor. But Periscope, hopefully you're still with me. But if you have a spouse or a significant other and they tell you day in and day out that they love you, but you don't see any actions as it relates to that, then I definitely want to encourage you that this is the same way that your children might be seeing your relationship with them. If they don't see in action the things that you are saying to them, then it's hard for them to interpret and essentially receive the experience of what it really would truly look like in terms of what you're trying to teach them in that same way. And Facebook, in case you are having too much of a trouble following along because the connection seems to be poor, then I'm going to show you a link to join me on Periscope if that is something that you so choose. So again, we're talking about how do your children actually see your faith in action, and how, as Christian parents, we often are teaching our children that they should be believing the Bible and the things of the Bible that we believe. The morals, our values, these are all based out of the Bible. But these things that we're teaching our children, if they can't see in our lives the same things that we're teaching, then it basically is hard for them to connect that reality to what you're trying to teach them. So in fact, we often can approach the idea of religion or our faith from a fearful place. And this is exactly, as I talk about, this is what I'm trying to, my goal is for you as moms to realize that you don't have to mother out of that place of fear. When you approach your mothering from that place of fear, then you don't come confident to your child. Instead, you're the opposite. You're coming very hesitant, and it's not very attractive. If you think about somebody who's selling you something, whatever it might be a TV screen, it might be a car, and if that person kind of sounds hesitant or unsure about what it is that they're trying to sell to you, well, how likely are you to actually purchase that thing from them? Similarly, your child, you might not realize it, but to a degree, it's almost like you're selling your morals and you're selling your values to your children. But if they don't see that in practice, then they question for themselves how important this really is and how important specifically it is for them. So with my son, one of my sons specifically brought up the question about his faith to me one night before bed. And it was a very honest and such a candid conversation that completely took me off guard because of his age. I told you I have a 9-year-old and twin 7-year-olds. And I don't remember which child it was. I think it was my oldest at the time. And he was in, I want to say it was 1st or 2nd grade when he started asking his faith questions. Now you have to understand, my husband and I, we are believers, and we've been teaching them what we believe as the ways that we feel that God wants us to train them as it relates to the Bible. So we have always given them memory verses, and they've been attending church and Sunday school, and we've really been intentional in how we're teaching them the stories of the Bible and what we can apply from what we learned, and very specific in how we do that. So they've gotten a lot of understanding and training and teaching as we believe, and we've been able to, as Christian parents, teaching our children to be like Christ. So when the question that he brought to me that night came up, hopefully you'll understand, I was very surprised. He said he wasn't too sure about whether he believed that God created the earth, because this is something that we believe as Christians, that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and that he physically formed them, and he spoke the world into life just from his words, and that's the power that God has. And so he understood that framework, but his question was, he wasn't sure if he actually believed it, because sometimes he thinks that the world kind of just exploded and became itself. And so for those of you who are familiar with other schools of thought of how the world or the earth began, you might think, well, he obviously must have heard a different theory, might have learned it in school or spoke to another friend about it. But I did specifically ask my child, where did he get this idea from? And he specifically said he was just thinking about it. I asked him, was this something that was talked about during one of his classes? He said no. I said, did any of your friends talk about what they believe or what they don't believe? He said no. I was just wondering, because that's actually what I was thinking might have happened. So I kind of believe, Mommy, that God might have created it, but then sometimes I want to believe that maybe God didn't create it. And so I shared this story with you to help you understand as parents, even Christian parents, that despite our efforts to make our children Christians, we cannot make our children Christians. It is neither our duty, neither do we even have the power to make our children Christians. Just as much as no one else made you into a believer, you eventually at some point in your life, whether you grew up going to church or you found Christ later on in life, you personally had to make that choice for yourself. And in the same way, our children are going to need to make that choice for themselves. So yes, our efforts as parents in our house, we intentionally try to teach our children to understand why we believe what we believe about the Bible and believe about Christ coming and dying on the cross for us. But we cannot control whether our children will choose to further continue in this way of wanting to live for Christ and choosing Christ for themselves, when they do get to that time, well, they'll have to make that choice for themselves. I'm not going to be able to go before God and say, well, I tried to make him and he didn't listen. Again, I cannot force my child to choose what I believe. I can only help show him why I believe and give him the examples, and hopefully he experiences God for himself. And that's what I pray day in and day out, for God to make himself real to them in his own way, in his perfect timing. And so these are the kind of conversations that we cannot be afraid to have with our children, even as Christians. A lot of families I'm very familiar with will run away from the kind of conversation that talks about other religions or other ways of thinking about how God works or who God is. And even a question like how my child had in terms of this big explosion will just automatically say, well, that's just not what we believe, or they're wrong, or that type of response. And I want to encourage you, Mom, don't respond that way. You need to realize that your child is coming to you with questions because this is just how they see their world. To a degree, it's kind of how their world has happened. They just showed up somewhere in terms of as far back as they can remember. And, gifts show up somewhere and their brothers show up and, all these things kind of show up. It's kind of really not far-fetched for them to think, oh, well, everything must have just showed up. And this is just in the case of my own child's question. But whatever that question might be, or however that question might be posed from your child, I want to encourage you to be attentive. I talked about this in my scope yesterday, and specifically with talking with your children, you want to listen carefully to what exactly they are saying. It's very important to listen to them so that they feel that they are being heard, that they are being understood, and that they can feel like they are actually being validated by how they feel and how they're seeing the world. I remember I was about 8 years old when, might have been a little earlier in my own life, when I remember I'd always gone to church and been around Sunday school and learned the Bible lessons, knew my books of the Bible. If any of you remember those days where we used to have Bible sword drills, I did all those sword drills and I was proud every time and I won. And so I knew my Bible stories very well, and I knew quite a few verses even at that point. But specifically, I remember going to bed one night and just toying with the different ideas that I had in regards to understanding God. And I really just all of a sudden on my own just started questioning, I wonder if this is true. What if Mommy and Daddy are wrong? What if I am wrong? And so I remember going to bed that night and praying, God, this is Andrea, and I know I always been praying to you, but I'm starting to wonder if I'm right or wrong. And so I ask you, God, I very vividly remember saying this prayer in 7 or 8 years old. I remember saying to God, if I'm wrong, please forgive me, but I'm trying to do what Mommy and Daddy are telling me to do, and I hope I'm right. And if I am right, then God, please forgive me for questioning you, because again, I'm just asking questions. So please help me to understand you for myself. And I prayed in Jesus' name, amen. Yes, I truly did say that prayer on my own. No, my parents never knew. I never did tell my parents that I had that kind of conversation by myself in a prayer to God. But again, I share that with you to help you understand, mom and dads, that we don't know how our children are processing what they understand of the world. And it's very important for us to be attentive to them when they come to us with questions so that we can help them understand their world. Don't be afraid to have these conversations and even research some of the questions that they are asking, because just like you came up with your understanding from your own experience and over time, and you had to do your own research, it's the same way that we want our children. I know in our house, I want my child to be able to think for himself and not just come and grow up with the idea of, I'm only doing this because mom told me to, or daddy told me to, or I don't really have a basis for why I believe what I believe. With that type of approach, you'll have a child that would be easily led astray from someone else that says the next best thing that tends to make sense or sounds good to them. And that's not the kind of thinking that we want to grow for our children. We are all created like God, and God is a very creative God, and we are all made to create, but you need your mind to be able to do that. In the same way, we need to teach our children to use their minds for themselves so that they can do and be exactly how God created them to be. That is the intentional goal that I have in opening those conversations with my children so that they can process what is really going through their mind. So one point I want to make sure, hopefully, that you receive from what I'm sharing today is remember to always be open to discussing these different perspectives that might come up from them. It really doesn't matter where the idea came from, if it's from a friend, if it's from school. A lot of times we're afraid for our children to be exposed. It really does not matter where it comes from because it's going to come, whether it's now or later. And as I said to you in previous live stream videos or periscopes, we never know when our children will automatically come across something that we're just surprised that it's come across. I am surprised daily on the things that my children bring home from what they learned at school or what they heard from their friends. Really and truly, I feel like it's getting younger and younger, but it still doesn't change the fact that they're still going to need to learn how to deal with it and how to process it for themselves. And my job as their mom, my goal is to help them learn how to process that and learn it for themselves. My next point that I want to make sure, I'm just looking at my notes, so please bear with me, that you can also learn alongside them. Maybe you never did look into what is really the basis for some of these other beliefs, or what is really the underlying understanding that these other thoughts or theories are. Learn along with them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that with your child. At the very least, you both get a better understanding, and your child will see that it's okay to question and that it's okay to find the answers and how to find the answers for themselves, and with you can help process. That is such a beautiful thing to be able to do with your child and model for your child so that your child can see, oh, mommy or daddy doesn't really know everything, but it's okay, just like I don't always know everything. And that they know they can still come to you and learn that with you, and that you're willing to do that with them, as opposed to the opposite kind of response where you're wrong, or don't ever bring that up again, or that's just not what we believe. Do you see the difference? That one is a lot more open for God to work in naturally and speak truth to your child in the way that he really is meant to do, as opposed to you just trying to shut down their way of thinking altogether and only believe what I'm telling you to believe and only do what I'm telling you to do. It's a completely different way of working. And with the culture the way it is, we cannot function as parents this way and effectively be able to affect our children in the way that we want them to grow, and training them up to think for themselves if we do that approach. The third point I want to bring up is definitely give back that control to God. And I kind of touched on this earlier. God is the one that's going to open himself and reveal himself to your children. And the sooner that you accept that and really open yourself, Mom, to having God speak into your child's life and into his heart, really just seek God to do that. Really pray for God to specifically use certain people or certain environments to really help him understand, help your child, him or her, understand God for him or herself. Because it's those situations that is going to build your child's own experience, so that eventually when they do grow up and Lord willing they do choose God for themselves, this is part of their testimony that they then can have to share with someone else who is searching for God themselves. How awesome that would be for your child to be able to speak into a friend's life knowing that they had that personal experience for themselves, as opposed to, well, this is just what our family does. It's a very different and real way for your child to be able to learn God for him or herself. And I encourage you to encourage them in that by giving God that control. And also by giving God that control, that also shows where your faith is rooted, as opposed to you trying to manhandle and control like a robot who your child is or who you want your child to become. Really allowing God, who really gave you that child in the first place, to really open that door up and allow those pathways to open for your child to walk through on him or her own. That is such a different approach, and also shows your child that faith for themselves, so that when they eventually grow up, and Lord willing, they have their own children and their own family, as an example to model for their own family, as opposed to thinking back, well, I just remember my mom always telling me we had to go, or we had to do, or this is why we believe, as opposed to really realizing for myself. If you think for yourself, Mom, what was your experience like growing up? Was it favorable? Was it negative? Was it mandatory and just shoved down your throat? Or was it more open and honest? And yes, this is a practice that we have as a family, but this is why we do it. And then when you got to a point where you no longer had to do it just because mom or dad were telling you to do it, then why did you choose or not choose that way? A lot of times I hear a lot of stories of people who eventually got to the point in their family where they always had to go to church, or they always had to do these things or believe this without really understanding why. And then when they got to an age where they didn't have to, they chose not to, not even because they didn't believe it for themselves, but more so because they were resistant to the forcefulness of it, that their parents, good-natured, very good-natured, but unfortunately, because it was forced on them, they were more defensively backing away from that, and because of that, they backed away from God. Do you see the difference? And so I hope and pray that by showing this to you in this way, it'll make you think of, how am I allowing my child to grow in his own relationship with Christ? How am I opening that door for faith to naturally move in, so that my child knows how to move in faith and to value himself as a child of God, so that he can grow his own roots in God, even from a young, tender age or as they get older. I definitely encourage you to think about those things intentionally, so that you can approach your parenting from that place intentionally. I'm just reading over my notes. So I guess my biggest takeaway for you as a parent is to think about, and I used this quote before, that you can either give someone a fish if they're hungry. However, if you teach them how to fish, then they will never hunger. And I know I misquoted it. I'm sure you've heard some version, or if you haven't, I'm sure you can Google it and find it out. But the point of that quote is the difference of teaching someone how to fish allows them to always know how to feed themselves for future generations. However, if you're just giving them a meal every time they're hungry, they're always going to know that they have to come back to you to eat another meal. And that dependency is what I don't want to grow in my children, so that they're always dependent and that they don't have that foundation for themselves. Instead, I want to build that foundation for my child. And maybe that's you, Mom. Maybe you really do want to build that foundation for yourself, or you realize that you've been creating more of a dependency type of relationship for your children. I completely understand. It has nothing to do with you being a bad mom, for sure. You love your child or your children. You're only doing what you believe is truly good and right for them. So there's no judgment where I am concerned, for no reason. Because we all have a reason for why we're doing what we're doing, and you do the best that you can. And oftentimes, especially as busy moms, we are tiring ourselves day in and day out doing the best that we think of that we can. Sometimes, when you realize that you don't know what to do, or that you do need help, this is where I would say that you need to look for help, and you need to look for resources. It might be your church, it might be a confidant friend, or it might be someone else, such as myself, who can help guide you on that how-to, or kind of role play maybe some of those conversations. Maybe have a conversation with your child or children and help to open those doors. Maybe you haven't had the best conversations with your child. Maybe it might be even the need for a therapy situation or counseling, or maybe a workshop. There's so many different options out there that if you really want to work on that relationship with your child, you can, because there are resources and tools that God Himself has created to help surround you. But if you're that mom who does not ask for help, even when you know you need it, then I really strongly encourage you that you really need to rethink, is that the best choice for you as a mom, as well as for your children? I know you don't want to settle. I know you try not to settle. Why would you? You do everything that you can for your children. But why settle with just doing what you think is best, knowing that you don't necessarily know everything, and knowing that you have access to help or assistance, but then not ask for it? That is a form of settling, and really, there are a lot of different concerns and underlying issues there that you really have to ask yourself, is this really the best option for my family? I want to encourage you, if any of what I'm saying is resonating with you, feel free to look in my profile. For those of you who are on Facebook, it's also in the title of this video. For those of you on Periscope, you'll see it in my profile. There is a link in there, bit.ly/Courage Coach Form. It's bit.ly/Courage Coach Form. bit.ly/Courage Coach Form. If you are looking for any type of guidance on how to, or maybe some of this is resonating for you, or even some of the other scopes or videos that I've put on for this week related to my book, I encourage you to reach out to me through that link. You'll be able to fill out a form that will help me understand what you're really struggling with. And then we can have a complimentary strategy session to talk about what some of those things are, how we can approach getting to that next step so you can deal with some of those struggles. I would love to be able to talk to you. No judgment, no pressure. Only someone who really cares about you and cares what matters to you, and knows that your children matter that much to you, and want to help you as you mother to your children, and not from that fearful place, but from that strong and powerful place that God wants you to mother from. The other thing that I want to suggest to you is, if you have not already, I encourage you to click on my other link. Facebook, it's in the title, and definitely Periscope, it's also in my title. The bit.ly/being honest with your children. bit.ly/being honest with your children. bit.ly/being honest with your children. If you click on that link, you'll be able to find more information about my book, Twin Mom Method, Being Honest with Your Children. And specifically, you'll be able to purchase that book. Ebook version as well as paperback is available. It's also available on Amazon. And I really encourage you, if you know of another family, we all do, who would be blessed by the ideas and just rethinking their approach, or maybe they're still expecting. That's a beautiful type of book to help new parents in thinking about how they can intentionally parent their children. I encourage you to purchase that book for them for Christmas and show them that you really love them by thinking about what really matters to them. And the same with yourself. I encourage you to love on yourself by purchasing this book for yourself. bit.ly/being honest with your children. It's available in paperback as well as an ebook, and I would love to hear your feedback, even on reading it. I would love to hear maybe some of the approaches. Maybe it's something that you've never thought of before, and it really opens your mind to really thinking about, okay, how can I use the moments that I have with my children in a more powerful, intentional, and effective way? These are the kind of conversations that I know this book will encourage you to have with yourself, your spouse, or significant other, and just in helping you to really use the time that God has given you intentionally to create and help your children to create and live in that purpose that God has created. So that is all I am sharing with you today. And this is also the final video that I will officially be talking about my book. There are definitely going to be other topics that I will talk about in future. So if you are not already following me on Periscope, make sure you click on those notification buttons so that you can get notifications on when I am on live again, and you'll be able to follow me on live. And for those of you on Facebook, definitely you can also link to me on my Facebook page if you're not following me already, and feel free to also share this scope on Periscope or this video on Facebook with your friends. We all know another mom who needed to hear this and just need that reassurance and just need that reminder that God really is in control, but we can also model our faith in action to our children. And so share this scope or this video with them. Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, you have various options, as well as yourself on Facebook. I just really want people to really think about our children and think about how this culture is ready. Our culture is not hanging back, is not worried about whether it's going to do or not do. It just does. And so the same way, I'm encouraging us as parents to not be wavering. We need to be strong, we need to be courageous, and we are intentional about raising our children in the way that we believe that they should be growing according to what God has written in His Word. Then we need to be ready just as much as the world is ready for them. And we need to be just as heard, if not louder. But we need to be intentional with those moments so that we are heard and not fearful. We need to be confident in how we approach it. And so that is my goal in working with you. And I would love to hear more from you or talk more with you if there are any issues or concerns that you have or would like to find out more on how you can take those steps. So I do hope and pray you have a wonderful rest of your Friday and enjoy whatever this day has for you. I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Talk to you. Bye-bye. Bye, Facebook. And bye, Periscope.